Okay, today we're talking about how to make Bishul Yisroel. We spoke about this already once beforehand, and it's going to be a third time eventually. But last time we spoke about the timing of it, and today we're going to talk about the different methods of doing it. Methods is different than the devices. That next time is devices. Okay, this is methods. Okay, you'll hear what I mean as I talk. Excuse me. Okay, so the most common way you make Bishul Yisroel in like a restaurant or even a commercial establishment is you'd light the fire. Okay, so that's the most typical way you do it. Obviously, I'm going to talk about other ways in a minute, but that's the most typical way. And in that, so the simplest is the mashgiach walks into the restaurant at the beginning in the morning. Think about like a restaurant, he turns on all the fires. Okay, that's the simplest way to turn on the fire. Okay, but what gets more complicated, or just you have to pay more attention to, is that if you're dealing with an existing fire, it could happen in like a food service kind of a place, but it's also even more so in like a commercial place, like a boiler that you're adjusting. Then the person who's doing it has got to make, the goal is to take a fire that was off and make the fire go on, not just to theoretically play around with the settings. Let me explain what I mean. So you walk to an oven. It's the same thing with a boiler. You walk to an oven, and the oven is set for 350, and the fire is raging. Okay, the fire is going because the oven is on, and now you turn it up to 400. Okay, nothing happens when you turn it to 400. Zero. The fire's on. The fire just stays on. And then you say, okay, I did my trick, and I put it back to 350. So what did you do? Zero. You said theoretically it should stay on for longer, and now you undid your theoretical thing, so that you didn't do anything. You didn't help turn on the fire. What he needs to do is he needs to make it at some way that the fire is off, and then what he does makes the fire go on. So, like let's say in his oven, if the flame is actually burning when he walks into the room, then you turn it down from 350 to 200. Oh, so that's going to make the fire go out. After he sees the fire go out, now you turn it back to 350. Now the fire is going to go on. Okay, the opposite. If the fire is off now, the fire is off because the oven's already at 350. So now turn it to 400 and wait a minute until you see the fire is going to go on, because it's going to say, oh, we have to be hotter. It'll go on. And then afterwards you could turn it down. But the point is, the same with the boiler. Okay, in the boiler also, just flipping the switch on and off, or turning the dial this way and that way doesn't do anything. Again, you have to get the flame has to be off, and then the flame has to be on. However you manage that, by turning things down, by turning things up.
Why is switched on and off?
If you switch it on and off, maybe in a boiler, if you switch it on and off, that might do something, maybe, But in a boiler, actually, it comes in a little different way. In boilers, turning something on doesn't have a direct effect. It takes some time until something happens. Boilers don't react so quickly like
they take the process for it.
That's true, right? So that's true. If you would turn it to on, if literally it was off and you turned it to on, I mean, unless they turn it off when you turn your back, it's going to go on.
But even an oven, you can press off and on. Let's say the fire is raging.
Is that going to turn it off that quickly? If you turn it off and on?
If you start the process for it to...
I'm not sure. Okay.
If it's on, you turn it off, it shuts the fire off immediately.
Does it do it? Is that immediate?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. If that works, that's fine. The point is, again, my point is, you got to get an off fire to an on fire. That's what you're trying to do. Okay.
No, our point is that if you're trying to make it simple, like a protocol, you can just say press off and on, and that you don't have to be mine.
Right. That's true.
It might be a better system.
I'm talking about the the practice. Like, how many times have you seen? You walk into the kitchen and the oven. The guys, I make a Bishul Yisroel. You see, turn it all this way and turn it back like that. Like in 1 second, just turn it this and that way, like without paying any attention to what's going on. And I just hit the dial this way and that way, and I made a Bishul Yisroel. And in fact, he did nothing. Okay. From that side of it about lighting fires. This is a little to do with next time, but most assume that setting a timer it doesn't do the trick. Okay, you have to actually do something. You flip a switch or you turn a dial that actually makes it happen now. Basically now, but setting a timer, meaning if I set the timer that says every morning at 6 o'clock the oven will go on, that's considered too indirect. It's like I set a timer that says every morning at 6 o'clock
so
the oven should go on. The switch is officially set to the on mode, but there's a timer.
The time it tackle light.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good.
Right. That's assumed that's too indirect. I'm not causing anything else. I'm just setting up that it could theoretically theoretically not the right word. No, it's because it's not. It's too unrelated to what I'm doing. Too gramatic, if you want to call it.
I mean, it's not koiche, it's koiche.
That's a way you can say it like that. Those are dangerous words because koiche is only by certain dinim that you have to have koiche. That's like a technical term, but yes, for colloquially, yes, it's too. Gram is a better way to say it. It's too indirect. Okay. Now let's move to some other stuff. Okay.
Is that a halachic?
There are people who think that a timer might work. Rebelsky would tell people that you could do it once. Unless if I set the timer now for tomorrow morning, that works. Or for every morning, it doesn't work. Most people don't buy that either.
Theoretically, really?
Yeah.
So theoretically, the Mashiach could come in every night and set it.
But the benefit of it is not the one night. That's really not the benefit. The benefit is that I don't have to back up that.
In case he oversleeps one morning.
Okay. Actually, when we're talking in a second, when we're talking next time about devices, one of our people specifically oversleeps. You know that. David Abrahammer, who has to turn on an oven, he occasionally on purpose forgets to turn it on to see will they scream and yell and call him, or do they have a workaround that they deal without the rabbi? So he purposely oversleeps sometimes. Okay.
I don't think he oversleeps.
He does oversleep. Okay. So aside from lighting the fire, now we talked last time about like stirring the pot. I'm not talking about that. Aside from actually lighting the fire itself, there's two other ways that you can make Bishul Yisroel. Hashlachas kisem and Aish M'aish. Okay, those are two ways where I'm not actually lighting the fire, but I could do that. Okay, so what do they mean first before I get into what they are? Hashlachas kisem means the literal translation is you throw in a piece of wood, a splinter of wood. The yid, that means is he did something to the fire. What he did has absolutely nothing to do with cooking. Doesn't have the slightest bit. This little piece of toothpick that I threw in doesn't do one bit for the cooking, but it works because it's a hecker. The person I showed that this food is not kosher for Yidden unless a Yid participates, and because the problem is chasnas, so you need a hecker. You have to show that we don't just take whatever we get from you. You have to have some kind of a hecker. Okay, I'm going to talk more about Hashlachas kisem sort of later. The other one is Aish M'aish. That is, the Yid did not light the fire of the oven. That's going to be used for cooking. The Yid lit a fire, and then they lit a fire from that fire. So then that's also considered to be Bishul Yisroel. Okay, and
why is it different than timer?
Why is it different than a timer?
He did a process for a process.
That's a good question. I don't remember. Okay. In both of these kind of cases, the Mechaber holds these only work for Pas Yisrael, not for Bishul Yisroel. And the Rama holds that they hold even for Bishul Yisrael also, which is what we do. Okay, so the Aish M'aish works. It used to be in lots of ovens. It works for certain kinds of situations, and let me just explain what that means from the technical side. I mean, it's like this: in almost every oven, any heating device doesn't light the big fire by itself. The big fire gets lit by a small fire called a pilot fire. Okay, so but most pilots nowadays are pilots that what goes on when you want to light a boiler, first the little fire turns on, and then the little fire is used to turn on the big fire. The big fire, the gas comes pouring out, and it lights up the big fire. But the little fire, the pilot light, doesn't stay on all the time. It goes on when it needs. When the big fire has to go on, first it turns on the little fire, and then that turns on the big fire. That's called that's a so to speak a regular pilot. Okay, then there's something. But what's good that has nothing to do with that doesn't have Aish M'aish. The Yid doesn't light the little fire. The little fire itself goes on and off all the time. Aish M'aish is when we have what's called a standing pilot. A standing pilot means a pilot that's on all the time. Okay, like years ago, it used to be in home ovens used to have that. They don't do it anymore because it's considered not fuel efficient to have it all the time. So a standing pilot is one that stays on all the time. If the pilot stays on all the time, if the Yid lights that standing pilot, then the big fire that lights from that is considered Aish M'aish. Okay, it doesn't exist in homes anymore, but it does exist in restaurants. Okay, big restaurant like food service, something like Yeshiva Kitchen or a restaurant, their pilots are standing pilots. They're on all the time. So then the Yid could light those pilots, like those little fires, and then the big fire lights from that. That's Aish M'aish. It's not a cooking fire, but it's the fire from which Yid lights. Okay, Moshe Katz had a variation of that. He said, I don't remember. I never pay attention to it, but he says in shawarma machines, the shawarma machine has got a lot of flames to it. But what happens is that during busy times, you want the fire to be on running at full strength. But when it's quiet time, you need the food to stay hot, but you don't want the fire all the time. You'll burn the food. So you turn it down. So what he said is that at least in some of the machines, if there's 6 flames, you could knock off 4 of them. Okay, you could turn off some of them and just leave some of them on. And what happens is when the later ones turn on, they light from the ones that are on. That's how the later ones, they don't light by themselves, so to speak. They light from the one that's on already. So if the Yid makes sure to turn it on in the morning, then even as they turn it up and down, it's going to stay. He says it's going to stay lit from the Yid's fire. Okay. Anyhow,
You're talking about that some say pilots of the evidence.
I'm going to that in a second. Get in a second. Okay. So this kind of using pilots is helpful. Okay, a million years ago it was helpful at homes. Like, if there was someone not Jewish working in your house, but in food service, it's used a lot because they have these pilots and makes it helpful.
Well, it won't help us fire.
What do you say?
But it doesn't help us fire.
Yeah. Well, Svardim anyhow doesn't help if you put on the fire anyhow.
So what's in it again?
Because if the food was on beforehand and then we lit the fire afterwards. Does that work for Svardim? I don't remember. I don't remember how it doesn't work for Svardim. We'll have to think about that. Okay, so the Ramah says, if you open up the Shulchan Aruch part of the Ramah, you would think that it completely works lechatchila. It says that it works. Aish M'aish works, no problems. But the Ramah comes from Isva Heter, and that Isva Heter says it's only b'diavad. The Magen Avram in Halachic of Asheres Meitzhuva also sounds like that. He says in Asheres Meitzhuva you should eat Pas Yisrael. He says, and if you can't get bread that was baked by a Yid, at least get stuff that was Pas Yisrael, but with Aish M'aish or Hashlachas kisem. He's like, as if you can't get baked by a Yid, take this, as if it's like a secondary choice, not a first choice. Mishmur brings it as a chacham. So there are those who say, therefore, you should not rely on this lechatchila, as long as it's b'diavad. Most of the hashgachas rely on it as a lechatchila. A lot of hashgachas rely on it as completely as lechatchila. Others say it's lechatchila for industrial applications, but not for restaurants, because in the restaurant we have a mashgiach anyhow. So it's sort of like, why should we rely on it, or something like along those lines? Like, why should we rely? Even though commercially we would rely on it, but in food service they say the Mashiach's there anyhow, so why should we rely on it? Or the CRC relies on it as a backup, meaning they say we don't want to rely on lechatchila, but we insist that the Mashiach light the pilots as a backup in case something goes wrong on the regular job that the Mashiach is supposed to be doing, which is to light the fires. He's supposed to turn on all fires. It's a backup. We're covering ourselves that we have this backup that the pilots will lit by the Yid.
Well, what's the need then if it's lechatchila b'diavad? What's the shayla?
It's a chiddush that you should be able to Aish M'aish. That I didn't like the fire that you cook with, so it's a chiddush. I'm not sure. I think it's just because of the chiddush shaboy. Just it's an unusual thing. It's not a gemara. It's just like okay. Then there's another sheet.
Hashlachas, you mentioned the Magen Avram. It sounds like Hashlachas kisem might be b'diavad. Nobody does that.
The Magen Avram took Hashlachas kisem. Yes, but people take that to mean both of them. It's not clear at all that the Magen Avram means that. He says Hashlachas kisem. And then there are people who have this other sheet, this really, this what I've tried to figure out. I haven't really gotten to the bottom of that. They don't rely on pilots except for a wok. Okay, in a wok, they rely on a pilot somehow because what's a wok? A wok is like
It's a frying pan.
It's like it's an unusually shaped frying pan because in a wok the idea is that the fire is right under the very bottom and the pilot is underneath that. And somehow, like that makes it different.
A wok is a device in which you cook things.
Yes.
You're saying it's not the chiddush in the wok. The chiddush is.
The way woks are built is that no. I'm sorry. Not a wok that's in your house. Not a wok that's in your house. In a food service, I should have been clear. In a food service, and their woks are built a certain way, and the pilot is like underneath it, and somehow since the pilot is underneath it instead of on the side, some of that makes it better.
Maybe the fire gives heat. There's a tiny drop of heat from that fire to the wok. That would make it.
I know in the kettle, for example, not only does the oven have a standing pilot, but the stove as well. They have 6 pilots.
The oven has a standing pilot?
Yes.
That's unusual. Okay.
The oven does not have a standing pilot.
Yes, it does.
It's not on. It's not kept on.
Yes, it is.
Well, it's not.
I done it myself.
I've turned it on myself every time I've made a kiddush. I had to go turn on the pilot of the oven.
Gas,
Right, I went to shut exactly.
Shut the gas. But when they turn on the gas, you're not using it. It's a standing pilot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in fact,
but the stove is also.
It does. He's saying it doesn't have the advantage of. Point is that if
the
works,
because they don't. I'll tell you why. Because the stove itself, each burner has a standing pilot too, and it's directly under thing, and it gets very hot. And because of that, and because they only make a kiddush once a week at most, they shut off the gas because the standing pilots are just annoying. And it creates heat.
Because they're very big fires?
The pilot itself is substantially big.
They're like
My point is, though, that the standing pilot, which is for the stoves, which is directly under the burner.
Which is usually not. It's usually not.
You're welcome to come by. I'll show
No,
you.
I believe
No,
theirs
I-
is
my
that
point
typically
is,
it's not.
I like Yossi's point because it's actually contributing directly to the heat.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be Aish M'aish. So it wouldn't be Aish
Right.
M'aish.
So then it's just then it's a Hashlachas kisem,
So it's kisem.
I think it's more.
or maybe it's even more than Hashlachas kisem. Okay, maybe. I mean, so the advantage of a standing pilot doesn't help if you're going to turn your gas off.
Yeah,
Okay, the point is that the restaurant it's on all the time. It doesn't help if we turn.
Because of the heat on the stove, you can't put anything down there. You put for storage during the week. You can't. It literally burns.
Okay, got it. Okay, so it's unusual. I'll have to go plug one day and see what it looks like. Okay, so now the next thing is practical, and that is that in the kotel they can have a standing pilot that stays on forever. Okay, in your house you could have that. In a restaurant kitchen, there's food spilling, and they use the oven as you think about it. They use it 100 times more than you do in your house, and it's messy. And pilots go out all the time. So how do they go out? Because that food spills. Okay,
It's underneath the oven.
it's in the stovetop.
Oh, the
In a stovetop. In a stove. That's what it is. It's really unusual to have it in an oven. But in the stovetop. But yeah, sometimes there is. Sometimes like a convection oven. Maybe is it could have a convection? No, in a convection, sometimes it's underneath it. That's true. That could be. But in a stovetop, it spills. To the point is that in lots of food service places, the pilots don't even work anymore. They've been so buried under chicken soup that they stop. They don't work at all. Okay. But they go out all the time. Okay. Now in a flat top, it's like a griddle. Okay. There the pilot is protected because it's underneath the flat top. It doesn't go out so much. But in a regular stovetop, it goes. They get off. They can commonly go out because it's just a messy kitchen. It's a big, busy, messy kitchen. Okay. So if there's hashgachah to me this, then the mashgiach, even if he's using the pilot, has to keep an eye on that pilot, and he'll make sure to relight it if it goes out. Not only can he make sure to light it when it goes out, but if it goes out and the people in the kitchen need it to be relit, then they just say, Rabbi, could you relight the pilot? Okay, because he's standing there, but he's available. Okay.
What if the burner stays hot? The metal.
We're going to talk about hot in a minute. I don't. You think could it be that the grates will stay hot and that will qualify? I guess that could be, but that's like maybe yes and maybe not. You know, maybe yes and maybe not. The pilot is our way. We know that we have a Aish M'aish to count on. But what happens is if there's no mashgiach there, you should know this idea is one of the reasons why hashgachas insist on hashgacha to meet this for these type of restaurants is because even if they have pilots to make Bishul Yisroel, you say, what do you mean? What's going to be the problem? It's always going to be Bishul Yisroel. Because things go out all the time, the Mashiach has to be there just to keep an eye on it. Because not only can he relight it, but what happens if you have a restaurant? Okay, it's 6 o'clock, all of a sudden the pilot goes out, okay, and there's no Mashiach to meet. 6 p.m. and there's no mashgiach there. Okay, so there's 100 people out there who want to eat. They're sitting in the restaurant waiting to eat. So now we have to call the mashgiach, to call the rabbi to come in. That in an hour from now he's going to show up and light the pilot, or will the guy just say, "No one's going to catch me. He's going to light it himself." Okay, so when the mashgiach is available, so then it could be he would light it himself. But first he'd get caught. But he goes, "There's a guy right there. So pull the guy from over there. Come here and light my pilot for me." But when you have a situation where where there is no mashgiach there, then you're setting yourself up for oh my gosh, somebody might. The goyim are very likely to have a great incentive to just light the fires. Okay, that's one of the reasons why you have to have a hashgachah to me this.
And those that don't, what are they relying on?
So those who don't are either not thinking about the fact that it might go out, or in din they're probably mutter. That's the truth, because the din is that Safek Bishul Akam is mutter, and the case in Shulchan Aruch of Safek Bishul Akam is that it could be it wasn't even the fire even went out. Okay, so in din it might be mutter, but it's not a good way to set up a hashgacha. It's like we're counting on Safek Bishul Akam to be mutter. You know what I mean? So it's not.
How often does it go out? Once a day?
It could be. It depends on the kitchen. It depends on.
It could be that frequently.
It could be now. So the people who don't have mashgiach tzmidi, what they'll do is they'll tell the mashgiach, whenever you come in or once a week when you come in, please relight all the pilots in case they went out when you weren't there. You know what I mean? And then there are two other ideas that people have. Yankee tells these places. He says every Sunday morning light a 7-day shiva candle in the kitchen, so that in case the goyim have to light the fire, at least they have a way to do the right thing if they want to.
How are they going to get the fire from here to there?
They'll take a match from here to there, like, you know.
It'd be easier just to take a lighter.
It would be, but at least we're giving some ideas of what we could do. Like, what could we do? Maybe where the guy could. I mean, think about how horrible it is for this guy when he's sitting there. He's in the middle of serving supper, and all of a sudden the fire goes out, and now he has to wait for the rabbi to show up. It's like
at least you give him
an eitzah. I mean, now the truth is, a lot of them. It's interesting is that a lot of kitchen people, which is good for the Jews, a lot of them will do is when they need to light a fire. Me and you turn the dial, try to or hit the clicker or whatever it is. They bang a pot from one grate to the other, and it just shoots off enough sparks or enough flame from one side to the other side, it lights at the other side. Yeah, you have to go like this, and all of a sudden the thing is lit. Okay, that's how the cooks. That's how the chefs do it. So maybe that's Aish M'aish also. That also might qualify. Yeah, they don't they don't pull out a match. Yeah, they like this. They bang across the fire from one side to the other. Okay, and then Rabbi Lubin said, let's put cameras in. Because at least you know how much you have to meet. At least that way you could maybe catch the guy. Even though it's really hard to believe you'd catch a guy. I mean, he has to only put his back to the camera for 1 second, and you won't see. You don't have the camera sitting pointed right at the pilot light, So maybe he'd be afraid to be caught. But it's
for a starter, they should ban lighters.
They do. Yeah, but lighters is not. It is not like a machine gun. Like how are you going to find the guy with a lighter? I mean, it's a little
smokes. Those are on lighter too.
Yeah, those guys are not allowed to have lighters officially. Yeah, all those are rules, but come on, not so. So that's one of the reasons why people insist on Hashgachah to me is because of Bishul Yisroel.
No, but that's a good point because even if one goes out, the rest of them might be lit, and if they just take a fire from there,
if they do, but
it'd be easier to think about it. It makes sense that they would.
That they would just light them like that.
Provide long stick matches with no way to strike it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't give the
box. We'll break off the end.
Then naturally they're going to take from the easiest source of fire, which is probably the one next to it, which
or the lighter in their pocket, or they can use a pan to move. So all those are reasons, and Safek Bishlakim in the end is mutter. Anyhow, okay, so could it be that in din is mutter? It's not good, and that's one of the reasons why people have for having a shachar to me is because of the Bishul Yisroel, even if they have pilots. Okay.
You can only rely on Safek if there's no eitzah, right? Kind of, if you say, I want to put the food on myself, like you're going to talk about one day, so then you can't rely on the fact that it's a Safek.
What do you mean you can't rely on it? I mean, is the person sitting outside eating his chicken, is he eating?
You have no idea.
Right, so it's a Safek.
The call is by Safek equal of Vurei, you have to do that. It's not equal of Vurei, but there's an eitzah to avoid relying on the Safek. Wouldn't you have to?
Who, the guy who's eating supper?
Yeah, let's say I want Bishul Yisroel for Friday.
I guess that could be, but I'm just thinking about the side. He said, "Why didn't you take Bishul Yisroel? The rabbi took care of it. It's all Bishul Yisroel. The rabbi's home sleeping, right? That's the truth. He's really sleeping. I think is it in the din? Is it mutter? Yes, okay. So okay.
Who are we fooling over here? If we know that on average you'll talk to him, how often per week does it go out? Right? The guy says it goes out 3 times a week. You can't really use something that a suffix is mutter. I said, sometimes it's fake is in the Chazal, like Arlo, something like that. Yeah, I don't care. It's a suffix, doesn't matter. It's mutter. Mutter be suffix, but that's not.
You don't know when it went out. Before it goes out, it's 100% mutter. You know
I understand, but you're saying about Hashgachah, where I know for every typically you know that 3 times a week.
It's not a good system.
Okay, so they asked me that question when I lived in New York. I was one of the people who checked the Erev in the neighborhood. And every single week we found things were down. So they said, as if every week there's something down. It was a big error. Everything is down. So why do you think it's going to make it through a Shabbos? If every week, let's say there were 3 things down, that means over the last 7 days, 3 things went down. It means every other day something breaks.
Check the full perimeter every week?
Yeah, so every other day something breaks. Like if 3 things were down, it means every other day something broke. So Shabbos is only 1 day, So, and they say, what happens if it's like 3-day yontif, like Thursday, Friday, Shabbos? By Shabbos, I mean, we're for sure hopeless. I mean, that it's gone by Shabbos, So that was a question people wondered about. I don't know what the answer was. Anyhow, that was.
I think they did better.
But I wonder, is it typical for Hashlachas of our CRCO, UChavK? Is it typical that they don't have a Mashgiach Midi?
No, I told you that. No, I told you that's a reason why we insist on Hashgachah. One of the reasons is because of the Bishul.
When is this your side coming?
Because other Hashgachas. There are other places who don't have Hashgachah.
Other Hashgachas.
It doesn't tell our places. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't clear. No. We have Hashgachah. I told you that's a reason why we insist on Hashgachah. That's one of the reasons for it. Other places who don't, who they can't afford it or whatever. It's not going to
tell a consumer who's going to a place that doesn't have Hashgachah this to do.
We probably tell them not to eat.
No, we'll do Bishul Yisroel.
So what would they do for Sfarim?
No. You can go in
and say, and please, I want to put the food onto the fire. Okay, I guess so.
I mean, the kale might be true.
Okay, this is not the biggest problem. Okay, fine. Let's go on. Let's go. We have one more bunch of things to talk about, and that is related to Hashlachas kisem, and that is the Mechaber like this. He says it's an unusual case. Yid lit the fire went out, okay, it cooked or whatever, and the fire went out, and it completely was out, zero, nothing left. And then the guy lit the fire. So the din is that if the fire oven was still hot when the guy lit his fire, then it's considered Bishul Yisroel or Pas Yisroel according to Machaber. It's considered a continuation, even though there was zero fire left when the guy came. As long as it was hot, it's considered it's a continuation of the Yid's fire, and it's because the way it's explained over there is because it's like Hashlachas kisem. It's a hecker. The fact that there was heat left over from the Yid's fire, it's as if it's like a Hashlachas kisem, like the heat from that fire is continuing to this fire, and that's considered enough of a hecker to make it to be Bishul Yisroel. Okay, now just as a pause, and not for today, it's really for next time, for the next part, and that is this is a raya. This is the raya against Rebelsky. Rebelsky said that you have to have Hashlachas kisem into an existing fire. You can't have Hashlachas kisem before the fire is there. Which from a logic, you hear the logic of it. But here's an example. We're doing Hashlachas kisem before the fire exists. Right? The kisem, the Yid's fire that was here from an hour ago, which just doesn't exist anymore, just his heat left over, is coming before the guy makes his fire that cooks the food in it. Okay, so the kisem, the heat from left over from the fire, comes before the guy makes his fire. Anyhow, okay, so how hot does the oven have to stay in order to be to qualify for this thing? So Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach told Rebelsky that it has to be high enough for cooking, and that is 176 degrees. Okay, now 176 degrees sounds like there were years of research to figure this out. Okay, but then we figured out that that's not what happened. It's like 98.6 is temperature for average people. It's not because scientists studied it for thousands of years and came up with an average. It's because in Celsius, 98.6 is 37 degrees Celsius. So it's a nice even number. It has nothing to do with anything. Just an even number. 37, yeah, so 37, give or take, is 37. So
you're destroying my trust in medicine.
So you know what I mean? If your kid has 98.8, it doesn't mean they have fever. You know, it doesn't mean anything. Nothing. Let's give it 37. It's a nice round number. So in Celsius, it's 80 degrees Celsius. So 176 sounds like mom's like years worth of studying of baking breads and this and that. Because everybody in the world lives. Because Shlomo Zalman lived in Eretz Yisrael, and he uses everyone in the world uses Celsius except for us. So he 80 degrees, okay, and that's because that's a minimal amount of baking. In fact, we tried it. We baked stuff at 80 degrees after a few hours, and Taka baked.
Did you try 79?
We tried it much lower, or like 150. It took like 10 hours to bake, but after a few hours, we were able to bake a roll at 80 degrees. Or anyhow, so that's it.
So what's the number in Celsius?
80 degrees Celsius. Oh, it's a nice round number. 80 degrees. 80 degrees. You know.
Say it again. At 176, you baked.
We took a roll, like a piece of dough, like that was, and put it into the oven at 176. Yeah. I forgot how many hours. A couple of hours. It baked into a roll. It baked. You know, it became baked at that temperature. But when we did a lower temperature, let's say 150 degrees, 150 Fahrenheit, 150 degrees, it took like 10 hours to bake. Okay, so it would eventually bake, but that's what he said was the cutoff. Okay. Most other people didn't agree with that. They felt that we're not looking. So Rav Shlomo Zalman was looking at it that it has to be a cooking temperature. So we need 80 degrees or 176. Baking is an amount that you could cook at this temperature. You could still use it's still considered as a fire of cooking. And most others said no. It just has to be. We're just looking for a hecker. So it just has to be hot. So the word hot doesn't mean it has to be hot for cooking. It has to be hotter than regular. So I don't know, 110 degrees. You know.
By Chazara, it's much lower temperature on Shabbos.
Right. So most others looked at it like that kind of temperature. As long as it's not, there it uses the word nitztan legami. As long as it didn't become room temperature, that's still hot. And the point is, it's just a hecker.
So she's much lower. Right.
So most others, which is a CRC position, most others think like that, is that as long as we're looking just for a hecker, as long as it's hotter than, so to speak, than room temperature. So 100 degrees, 110 degrees is already hot. So the word hot is a little misleading here because it's really just warm, so to speak. But that's good enough. Okay.
What's the application?
What do you say? I'm going to tell you an application in a second about that. Yeah, I'm going to tell you the application in a second. Now, before I get to that application, some of the Achronim say that it only works for a week. Okay, it's a way of reading of a Beis Yosef that only lasts for a week. This thing that if the heat of let's say you lit the fire and it went out, and then the oven stays hot, that carryover can only after a week it expires.
7 days.
7 days. It expires. Okay, there's not really such a logic to that. It's hard to understand it, and most assume that he didn't.
It's still hot.
No. I mean, it was hot. It was hot, and then it cooled down, and then the guy lit a fire.
But it stayed hot for a week?
No.
Fire?
It stayed hot for a few hours, and the guy lit a fire. But then that eventually peters out. And eventually you say the guy keeps lighting more and more fires forever and forever.
Let's say the guy lights a fire for 2 weeks. So it still expires after a week?
Yeah, it will expire after a week. The whole thing, so it doesn't, not so logical, whatever it is. But the most assume that it was a practical, the case they were talking about was a practical case that it happened to be that after 7 days there wasn't going to be any fire left. Okay, so most people hold that there's no such requirement, no such expiration date in din. But in a related thing, and then you have to hear these say maybe that's what they meant. Rabelsky said is let's pay attention to the fact that what we're trying to do is we have to make a hecker that a yid has to participate in cooking in order to make the food mutter. He says it can't be. It seems wrong to think that we could light a fire and that forever it will stay Bishul Yisroel, and the goyim can cook from now till forever without paying any attention to yidden. The whole idea is to say we have to make a hecker that yidden are involved in the cooking. So how could it be that we do something one day and then now and for the next 100 years it will always be Bishul Yisroel? The yidden don't have to participate. So he didn't say it didn't a requirement. It was a Hashgachah kind of a point that when the mashgichim walk in to places they should make sure it's Bishul Yisroel every time they go in. Or once a month. Guys should do something. So you go into a factory that needs Bishul Yisroel. So we tell people to do it because maybe something went wrong. Like maybe they turned off the fire and we didn't notice it. Like whatever our system we have didn't work. So it's worth it to relight the fires. But even if we know it was perfect all the time, Rebelsky was like, the idea here is to make a hecker, so we should be making that hecker give or take once a month. That was his thing. Okay, now it's not a requirement, but it's more. I tell people to do it more for the other side, which is if something went wrong, we can only have a month worth of a problem. So if you visit once a month, when you show up, or once a few times a year, however often you come there, you should be adjusting the boiler, or whatever your fire is. Just it's a sort of a safety.
Like in very, very industrial places where they say our boiler just goes on, it just stays on. Every time a shia comes to visit, you should do that also.
So I tell people that if they can, they should adjust it. You don't have to turn it off. You just turn it down and up or whatever it is to adjust it to, in case we miss something.
Is that easy in a boiler, just to turn it down and up?
Yeah, I used to do it. It's not such a big deal.
I thought you said you got to make it go from off to on.
So it's a matter of turning it down, the amount of steam that you want, turning it to down, waiting for the flames to go out. That's its own fun, just to watch for the fire to go out. You could see the fire go out. There's a porthole to see it.
Nobody doesn't mind.
If you get along no, it doesn't make a difference for 2 minutes. As you get along with the guy in the boiler room, then you're okay.
I don't know if we do this.
Okay. If
it should be a policy, then
it's not a strong requirement.
Like what kind of place? Like what kind of?
We have an egg place.
Egg place, like.
I used to do it there. That's right. In the egg place that's right here. That's where I used to go. I used to go in there. I talked to, I forgot what the guy's name was. He was his own character, and I used to go to him, and we used to schmooze a little bit, and then I would turn the thing down, and come on, Rabbi, you want to do it? I'd turn the thing down, and wait for the fire to go out, and turn it back on, so.
I have a hummus place that, I tell you,
what place?
Hummus. Which we don't hold needs it, but I said, might as well do it. Let's do it. I told Mashir, just keep tabs on when they do their boiler maintenance, because otherwise it supposedly stays on the whole time, and just turn it on, coordinate it.
Okay,
so every time to go in there too.
Okay, good you came today. Anyhow, so
I don't know if I'm changing though.
Okay, I knew that. Okay, so now this Ramah is l'chayra, the pshat of how we make Bishul Yisroel in ovens and boilers, and that's because our oven doesn't work like the Beis Yosef's oven does, which is in 1,000 years ago, your oven worked because you're putting wood into the fire and the fire stayed on. But our ovens go off. As soon as it hits the temperature that you set it for, the fire goes off. So I turn the oven on, let's say, not a stovetop, an oven. I turn the oven or the boiler on, I turn it on, and it's cold now, and after 15 minutes it gets up to temperature, and then the fire goes out. So the Yid's fire is out. So how is it Bishul Yisroel if in an hour from now someone cooks food in there? The Yid didn't make the fire. What? So the answer, the reason why it works is because this is what the Machaber said, that if if it stays hot from my lighting, which of course it does, if I got up to 350, it stays hot from mine. So now the fact that the later on the goyim are involved in the cooking makes a difference because it's a continuation of my fire, and that's why it's good enough. Okay, so if that's the logic for why it works, for why it's considered mutter, then we run into a problem for a convection oven. Okay, a convection oven is a kind of oven that you see in food service or yeshiva kitchens. Okay, it's the kind of oven that opens with the doors open. I don't know how you say this, sideways. Instead of pulling it down, it opens to the side. It has double doors. Okay, that's not what makes it special. That it has the doors open, the double doors opening side. That's not what's special about it. It's called convection oven because it cooks with convection. Okay, convection means it has to do with circulating the air. It's a different way of cooking. And what happens is that aside from the heat that's in the chamber, the air gets circulated, and that makes it cook faster. Okay, makes it cook faster. So how does the air circulate? Because there's a fan. Okay, and the fan is always in the back of the oven, and it blows the air around, and that makes the food cook faster. Fine. But there's an obvious problem with an oven like that, which is that if there's a fan blowing hot in the back, when you open the door, you can get the hot air blown in your face. Okay, it's blowing from the back. It's going to blow in your face. So every convection oven comes with a safety feature that when you open the door, the fan turns off. In most of them, the flame also turns off. So what happens is, what'd you say?
Why does the flame turn off?
I guess that's just a matter of like saving energy. Is thinking that why are we heating up the whole kitchen for? Why are we keeping the heat on for the kitchen? I'm not sure why, but that's what the fan always goes off. Because again, if you didn't turn the fan off, it just blows in your face. And the flame usually goes off also. So what happens is, oh, I forgot to write that. Okay, so what happens is, what happens is in a smaller kitchen. You open the oven, take your food out, and put new food into it. So it takes a minute or two, it's not a big deal. The oven's going to stay hot anyhow. But in some places, what will happen is they open up the convection oven, take out the food, until they're ready to put the new food back in. It takes a long time. And the concern is that if you wait for long enough, the oven will completely cool down.
Below 110.
Below 176 or 110, whichever one you think is the shear. So if that would happen, that would cool all the way down, then when the guy closes the door, he's the one who turns on the fire. There's no leftover heat, there's no residual heat from the yin. Okay? So because of this concern, it is this big ASIC that in convection ovens, every time the door gets open, mashgiach has to close the door. Okay? And they tell some mashgichim, they say, is every time you walk past the convection oven, open the door and close the door. This way, in case you miss the guy pulling out a piece of chicken, you'll be relighting the fires. Okay? Now, it happens to be.
If they had to miss the guy pulling out a piece of chicken, and the door was left open.
Correct.
On top, so
right.
So.
Mama should have to been davening. What's it called?
Maybe we should time. How long it takes.
So right. So even if you didn't miss Yom Kippur Katan, even if you didn't have Yom Kippur Katan right now. So what happens? I went to a place. I'm not such a believer. I went to a place and had a convection oven, and it was all nice and hot. It had been on all day, and I tested it. And in the back of the oven. It got under 176, if you hold that's the cutoff, in about 10 minutes of being open.
It also depends on how hot.
It had a cooking temperature, 350, the normal cooking temperature. So I started with that had been on all day. It wasn't like they turned it on for me. It had been on all day, and after 20 minutes, it was still more than 120 degrees. I gave up. It wasn't changing. It was going no place. It was just basically staying put at like over 120 degrees in the back. In the front of the oven, it was also got under 176 also in about 10 minutes, maybe a little less. And after 20 minutes, it was already under 100 degrees. Okay, it had cooled off considerably in the front. But even heat in the back, the should be good enough also. So if you hold the cutoff is the lower, if you hold the cutoff as the higher amount, then maybe you think if it stays open for 10 minutes. If you hold the cutoff as the lower amount, and maybe it's l'shitase, that's where it came from. But if you hold the cutoff as the lower amount, it's hard to believe it could ever stay open for so long that it would cool off completely. I mean, literally, it would have to be after 20 minutes. It was still warm. It was still hot enough for us in the back of the oven.
It sounds like a simple way is just to make sure to find a setting that the flame should stay on.
So that there are people who do overrides, and they do
override on the fan.
override on the flame to make it that our flame, no matter what, will always stay on, because then it'll always keep it warm, and the flame will keep on burning. Yeah, so there are people who do that. They do overrides, but others are like neurotic. I mean, they have the mashgichim always running after this door to keep that door closed.
How hard is it to do that override?
It's a mechanical thing, so you have to bring someone in to do it. So it's
not a setting from the manufacturer.
No, it's a patchka. No, and there are even people who sell convection ovens made for kosher places that are already built with the override in them. Whatever it keeps the flame on. Yeah. Okay. But this is like a big thing. This is like oh my gosh, the guy didn't take care of his convection oven. That's like a big thing to see someone do that. Like see how backward someone is. And I'm not so convinced it's such a horrible thing. Now, but you should know. Now, there's a completely different way of looking at it. Hashgachah has a completely different way of looking at this. I told you that ovens and boilers are mutter because since it stays warm, that's what makes it to be. This residual heat is the case of the mechaber. Hashlachas says no. He says you don't need that. I mean, it's true. He said, but it's not true. You don't need that. He said is the reason why the oven stays on all day long is because I flipped the switch in the morning. I turned it on in the morning, and I set the whole thing in motion that it will get to 350, and then it will go a little lower, and then it'll go higher, and it'll keep it going on and off. He says, it's not mutter because of the residual heat. It's not because I did the residual, that since it's leftover heat from my fire, when the next person makes a fire, he's continuing my fire. No, he says, I made the fire. Who turned the oven on in the morning? The rabbi turned the oven on in the morning, and then it goes, the cycling on and off, that's how the oven functions. So he thinks it's mutter from a completely different reason. Ken Zain that would work even for convection. Not so for sure. Because when you open the door, you didn't turn it off. In other words, I'm the one who turned the switch on. I made it go. I set this thing in.
That's a condition that the door has to be closed.
Right. So that maybe the door you could yesh lodan on the door. Whether maybe the door is like literally like turning it off, as if there's two switches to this oven. So
they both have to be activated.
So that could be, but for a regular oven, I'm just telling you, for a regular oven, Hashlachas thought it was mutter not from this fancy residual heat kind of reason.
What's the nafkamina that he was saying?
He was just, it was just logic, just explanation. I don't remember what he said about the convection oven. I know there was a question: should that extend to convection ovens also? Yesh lo done on that. Anyhow, but Lamaisa, I'm telling you that people are very particular about these convection ovens. That it's like a thing.
But what do we do?
Well, the mashgiach has to close the doors, of course. What I mean is that if I walked into your hashgachah and saw that you guys didn't know about convection ovens, it would be like how could you not even know something so obvious, like not to know about convection ovens?
Know about the issue, right?
The question how they do it.
Right, no, you're right. No, you're saying. I mean, if the guy would respond to me, I know about the issue, but David tested it for me and he told me that it doesn't cool down. That could be yes. So I guess if he didn't know, then it shows he's out of touch maybe too. Okay.